So this final session is with Zach Warren, who is the Chief Security Advisor in EMEA for Tanium. Zach started his career in IT with a passion for cybersecurity and was a security analyst at the leading manufacturer of security platforms and later a cybersecurity architect and consultant for a large systems integrator. Today, Zach is responsible for developing and supporting Tanium's cybersecurity business in EMEA. Zach, the floor is yours.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Can I get a show of hands if you guys hear me? Can you all hear me okay? Okay, wonderful. So I've done this before and spoken at an event where everybody's got their headphones on. And for me as a speaker, it's the strangest thing in the whole wide world, right? Because usually you hear people laughing and, kind of get along because I like to have a little fun while I give my talks. And here it's like dead silence, It's like the first time you drive an electric car, you step on the gas, you go, but you're like, where's the noise I'm looking for, right? That's why I still don't own an electric car. I like the noise. All right, so yeah, thank you for having me today. My name is Zach Warren. As a Chief Security Advisor for Tanium, it's my role to have conversations with CIOs and CISOs and maybe SOC managers and things like that to have kind of in-depth conversations about how to get more value out of the technology and platforms that you have in your environments today. My background is in the Department of Defense within the United States government, where I also worked in the United States Air Force, rolling out Tanium of all things. So I'm a Tanium customer. I was a Tanium partner. Now I work at Tanium for the past 2 years and 10 months or so. So I've been using Tanium's technology for over 10 years, 12 years now, 13 years, who knows. But I rolled it out to 1.3 million endpoints within the United States Air Force and was managing 1.3 million endpoints utilizing Tanium. That means I had the United States Air Force at 96% patched at all time. I could ask any question of my environment and be able to find any vulnerability in that environment within 15 seconds. So that's kind of, 2 words to my background, the technology of Tanium, utilizing Tanium. And what I'm going to talk about today is through my experience, through the companies that I work with today, that I'm coaching today, or even my own organizations where I've been in the CISO role, what I built to be able to improve security and make security more robust in organizations. Because if there's any CISOs and future CISOs here with us today, one of the big things that happens is you get invited in or you get a new role as a CISO, and then they say, now protect us, right? And your first question should be, well, what am I protecting, right? So it's just like protecting your home. You need to know what it is that you have. So what I wanted to do is talk about regulations. No, I'm not going to go into depth, so please don't get up and leave, right? I'm not going to bore you to tears talking about NIS2 and DORA. But we all do realize that there's different types of regulations out there. GDPR in the US, I dealt a lot with HIPAA and PCI, right? Keeping our customers' data secure and safe. Also making sure that anytime that we're audited, that we can showcase that we are doing our best to be compliant, okay? So by a show of hands, who feels confident today that if I came in and audited your organization for any one of the regulations that you are having to abide by, you feel like you would pass an audit? Anybody feel good about it? All right, we got some discipline here. This is great, I love it. Okay, but for the rest of us imperfect people, it is always a stress to get prepared for audits. It's always a stress to see where do we stand today. Are we better than we were, 6 months ago, right? So this is some of the things that I want to talk about today. And there is going to be a growing number of regulations. Now, one of the things that I think is quite interesting is, as I go and I talk to CIOs and CISOs about, because I live in Hamburg, Germany. I know you hear the American accent. Yes, I am from West Texas, but I married a German about 15 years ago, right? So I live in Hamburg, Germany. And when I go and I talk to organizations throughout Europe about DORA and NIS2, they're saying, oh yeah, but Zach, I'm not worried about it, because you remember GDPR? Nobody actually knocked at my door and said, pay up, right? When we had some sort of violation. So, I'm not really too worried about it. And it's just kind of a check the box kind of mentality that most organizations are taking. If I was in the driver's seat as a CISO, this would be the perfect time to have a CFO conversation, right? So even though my background's in security, I get brought in more and more by our team at Tanium to meet the CFO and help him understand or her understand what the risk is that they're taking on by not taking these things seriously, by just checking the box and saying, yeah, we're compliant, but not actually building it up and making robust programs around it. So that's what I want to talk about today. Because what we're really trying to do is we're trying to level set organizations. Because if you think about it, some organizations, think about your supply chain, think about your own business, think about your competitors. Some organizations invested in cybersecurity. Some organizations did not invest in cybersecurity. But in some way or another, a lot of our businesses are connected. And so there's a lot of weak links in this supply chain, if you will. And so you're hearing a lot about supply chain attacks. And because of these weak links, these companies that haven't invested in security properly are causing security risks for the rest of us. So by building these different regulations, they're trying to level set all this. And I think it's a good strategy, but just a few months ago, I was actually at the EU Commission in Brussels, and I talked to some of the people that put DORA and NIS2 together, and I said, you guys copied each other, didn't you? Yeah, a little copy and paste here. So if you take a look at the two of them, they're fairly similar. And there's some programs that if you establish them, like visibility and control, if you establish that to support DORA, for example, you're gonna also be able to check the box around NIS2 as well, right? So one of the things that I find very interesting is, of course, we're seeing more and more of a rise of these different regulations because we're seeing more and more risk, more and more attacks on organizations. We just saw recently Lazarus, if you're not familiar with Lazarus, they are a North Korean hacking group, just break in and start to infect with malware a software company right in the middle of the supply chain, right? So lots of different organizations using this software, and Lazarus has just, gone to work on them, and they are pushing this software out all over the world, and so thus sharing their vulnerability or sharing the malware throughout the world. So you're seeing this rise in these regulations, and what I'm seeing is what I was just talking about, this kind of idea of, yeah, I get it, Zach, we got to be compliant, but we're not really gonna, take it too seriously. Well, why not? Why not? Take this opportunity to go to the CFO or go to the board or have conversations with, a level above where you're sitting today maybe, and say, what are we doing here? How serious are we taking these regulations? And could we maybe get budget to be able to invest in things that we haven't had budget before? Jamie Dimon comes to mind. He is the CEO of JP Morgan Chase, right? And he was bragging about having $20 million as a cybersecurity budget for his organization. Anybody here have a $20 million cybersecurity budget? Would anybody like a $20 million cybersecurity budget? Yeah, me too, right? However, what percentage do you all think, and yes, I can hear you. So what percentage do you all think that is of his overall IT budget? $20 million. JP Morgan Chase, what's his actual IT budget? 5%? That's good. 1%? Ooh, you're rough. That's a little bit more than that. It's 6%, right? So add those together. No. So 6%, yeah. So the question always is that enough of an investment in cybersecurity? If I was his CISO, I would say absolutely not, right? Of course. Give me another 20 million, right? Let's make it 40, round that up. Okay, so this is what we're looking at. So the consequences that I see when organizations don't take regulations seriously is it's kind of a false sense of security, right? It's like I trained Krav Maga for many years, but I've had people come into think about jujitsu, all right? Some sort of martial art. You have somebody come in and take one self-defense class, and then that person's gonna go and walk through the meanest streets of, downtown Glasgow, right? And be like, yeah, go ahead, try to rob me. I took one class in self-defense. That is such a false sense of security, right? And so if you're just doing a checkbox and you're saying, yes, I am compliant, I'm secure, no. Does compliancy equal security? I hope to see all the heads shaking, absolutely not, right? So we need to utilize it as an opportunity to build real security postures. A lot of times, organizations can actually turn this absolutely around. If you think about the supply chain, if you think about working and the kind of business-to-business opportunities that your organization might have, imagine actually being able to say, we have taken regulations seriously, we have programs built around these things, and to separate us from our competition, I'm going to let you know how serious we are about cybersecurity. Because to be honest with you, if I was looking to partner with you and you came to me with that message, boy, I'd sign up right away, right? So it could be an advantage instead of being a loss of customer trust, right? It could be an advantage. And then of course, there's the financial penalties, right? So the big question is always, okay, Zach, but when are the men in dark suits with dark glasses gonna knock on my door and ask me for $2 million because I wasn't compliant? Well, it didn't happen with GDPR very often. A couple times it did, right? But you know, so it's kind of a question. This is kind of the scare tactics, if you will, right? And then one of the things that cyber insurers, right? I've been wrestling with the idea of starting my own cyber insurance company because man, there's some money involved with that, right? And doing assessments to help organizations see if they're ready to invest or purchase cyber insurance. But if any of you have ever had a fender bender, right? You know exactly how insurance companies work. They do not want to pay, right? So you put all this money into your insurance policy, you get into a little fender bender and you're like, come on, can't you replace the front light of my car, please? And they're like, well, no, you actually were, you know, driving 1 mile per hour under the speed limit, which you shouldn't have been, or whatever, you know, they come up with some sort of crazy excuse. It's going to be the same thing with cyber insurers. They're starting to utilize the regulations as audit kind of frameworks to be able to then let you know whether or not they're going to insure you or not, right? So that's also something to look at if you're interested in cybersecurity, cyber insurance. So here's some of the things that I like to see in organizations, which I challenge organizations around, because this shouldn't be anything new, but think about the discipline in your own organization, right? And what you're actually doing, and if you're actually following these, you know, quote unquote, simple steps. Risk assessments. How often do you all do some sort of risk assessment, tabletop exercise, anything like that in your organization for your security teams? Is that regular? Is that happening regularly? Go ahead and show me your hand so that I can know that you're listening. Not very often. Okay. Okay. So we see some gaps there. Okay. I'll give you a little story, a little insight here. A friend of mine who was at the CIA for about 26 years, right? He was a career guy. When he left, he went into the private sector, and his first job was as a CISO for a large manufacturer on the West Coast of the United States. And he got in there, he started asking questions about the environment that it was his job to protect. And he was not getting any answers that he trusted. And so he called me and he said, Zach, I don't trust anything anybody's telling me here. It sounds like they're making up numbers. And I was like, well, you've been in the CIA for 26 years, so of course you don't trust anyone, right? I don't trust you, you know? So he's like, no, it's not that. It's just that they give me all these different answers. And I can't find a median somewhere between all the data that I get to make a proper decision on what direction we're gonna be taking the organization as far as cyber is concerned. So I sat down with him and designed a tabletop exercise where I basically hacked their organization theoretically, right? Because we didn't want to do any damage, no harm, right? But I showcased how I could shut down his entire manufacturing floor with a single ping, right? Now, when I showed him that, it was shocking to him, even with all of his experience. But when we brought it into a tabletop workshop, I then presented that to all of his technical team and said, this is what you're seeing in the environment. Now figure out how I've done this. And they did. They were great. They were talented security analysts on his team, a group of great people with poor tooling and poor processes, right? So as I noticed that and started taking notes, and so did he, we noticed all of these broken processes and incident response and threat hunting, right? And so I took that and I reported that up to his team, up to the C-level, and they asked me to go report that to the board and to the CFO and CIO and some other people. Once I had done that, this company, remember, manufacturing, they were 5-star in everything that they did, right? So when I told the CFO that his cyber program was not even a 1-star, he was very upset. And he leaned across the table to his CIO, pointed at me and said, hey, is what this kid talking about? Because this really happened to us, which I was totally offended by because I was like 35 at the time. I was like, not a child. And I said, he's like, yeah, this could absolutely happen to us, right? And so the CFO then turned to us and said, well, the checkbook is open, right? So use these as opportunities to educate our executives on what the true risk is for the organization, right? When he saw that me as an individual person could shut down his whole manufacturing with a ping, it freaked him out, right? Millions of dollars lost a day, right? Let's make sure that our security controls are in place. How are you testing these, right? How are you testing them and how are you measuring your security controls? Are you making sure that all your end devices are hardened, right? Are you doing all the right things? Are all of you doing, I hope, internally for all employees security training, right? Can I get hands on this one as well? Okay, that looks a lot better, yeah. Because it's super important. People ask me all the time, what is the weak link in cybersecurity? Why are there so many breaches? Why are we seeing all this data leakage and stuff like that? And they always want me to point to some software manufacturer, or they want me to say Microsoft is the, the middle of, the soul of all things evil, but it's absolutely not true. It's just people not knowing, right? And it's not even malicious. 95% of the major breaches are not malicious. They're an accident, right? Now they're malicious from the side of the attacker, obviously, but from the employee, not malicious typically. And then finally, incident response. Who here has a really clear understanding of what their incident response plan is? I already know you do. So, yeah, good. I've had incident response plans put on my desk and it's like 600 pages. And I'm like, really? Who read this, right? Who wrote this, first of all? Who took the time to do that? So one of the things that I always ask is make sure that everybody in your organization, in your security organization, so let me break it down. First of all, make sure everybody in your security organization can very clearly explain this incident response plan to me or to my grandmother or to my 5-year-old, right? That's how well we should understand our incident response plan in the security team. Then take a step outside into IT, right? Into the rest of the team. And they need to be able to explain it at least high level and say, hey, when I see this happening, I know to get in touch with this guy right here, right? Whatever the plan is, make sure that everybody can start to have that conversation, right? Now, when I start to look at a proactive approach, because the worst thing in the world is to be in a house that's on fire and then be like, how do we get this fire out, right? Why don't we do a little bit of proactive stuff first, right? So first, we need to reduce the different ways that organizations get into our environments. That's all the vulnerabilities that are out there and prevalent in our organizations, right? We need to be able to improve our customer trust by having the right conversations, by building out our capabilities and being able to use that as leverage, right? When we're having conversations. And then in the long run, if we're doing a proactive approach, it's much less expensive to invest in cybersecurity than it is to come back after a severe breach, right? A severe breach. We all get breached every day, all the time, right? But when you really start to lose your data and you start to lose customer trust, that's where it really gets expensive. So it's better to spend $1 million and at the end of the day, save yourself, $5 million than it is to, lose the 5 mil. And same thing with enable. Enable your people, enable your teams. So this is kind of like, well, I'm gonna jump past this real quick because I wanna get to the why. Why we're doing these things. One of the main questions that I get is why am I so passionate about cybersecurity? Why do I enjoy doing what I do? And really it comes down to just kind of a simple idea of my own family members, right? Because I'm in cyber, they're not, right? My wife always tells me to lie when I'm at a barbecue and someone says, hey, so what do you do, Zach? She's like, just tell them you're in software sales and then they won't want to talk to you anymore, right? So yeah, oh, I sell software. Oh, okay, yeah, great, nice to meet you. And they move on, right? Because as soon as I say I'm in cybersecurity, they're like, oh my God, I just read this article, you know, and then they want to get into it. And then I start talking about the Russians and the Iranians and the Israelis and start talking about things, you know, like Pegasus. And I start scaring people. And then everybody leaves the barbecue and I'm standing there by myself like, hey, where did everybody go? So why are we doing this, right? It's because the passion that we have for protecting people, right? The passion that we have for protecting our organizations that we're in. Let's level the playing field. Let's look at what are the bad guys doing? How many of you understand what you look like to an attacker? That for me is a major question, right? So I will give you an example. I was in Rome last week with my wife on vacation. I feel like to an attacker, I look like somebody you don't want to pickpocket, right? However, somebody tried to pickpocket me in Rome, right? So again, false sense of security. I didn't realize that in Rome, they don't care what you look like. They'll pickpocket anybody, right? I thought I was maybe a little too tall or a little too wide to get pickpocketed. No, they were more than happy to try to take my wallet. They weren't successful. But we want to be able to say, hey, what do we look like to an attacker? And then build our security posture around that. Make sure that we understand where we fit. What are we actually in the business of doing? When I was talking to a hospital, they said, yeah, we're a hospital, patient data, all that kind of stuff. And I said, well, actually, I understood that you are one of the top cancer research centers. Oh yeah, we do that too, right? We're well known for our cancer research. I said, well, isn't that your IP? Isn't that data that we should be protecting? Oh yeah, so where does that live? I don't know, right? So let's work on understanding what we're in the business of doing. The incentives sometimes, right? So one of the struggles for me and one of the things that I want to share today is building strong teams, enabling individuals to learn more about cybersecurity, to be more active in cybersecurity. Sometimes there's a lack of incentive to do the right thing. There's a lack of incentive to be out there fighting the good fight. When you try to get more budget to do the right things in your organization, they're like, God, here comes security again, trying to get more money. Or you work for a bank, I just had this recently, where they're rolling out a new product for all their customers to use on their phone, and they didn't even check with the CISO. So 2 weeks before this thing is supposed to go live, and it's a huge product that the bank is rolling out, they throw it on the CISO's desk and say, hey, stamp that, and say that it's good to go and put it out there. And what did the CISO do? No, I'm gonna have my guys look at it. They looked at it, vulnerabilities out the yin-yang, right? And so what did we have to do? They called a few of us in and we had to not start from scratch, but we had to build security measures into the product, right? So into the application that they wound up pushing out 2 weeks late. And you think the board liked that? No, right? So let's make sure that we're doing those things. And then standardization and consistency. I want to see a more simple environment to support. How many people here have more than 50 security tools in their environment? How many people know how many tools they have in their environment? Okay, right? It's insane what's out there sometimes. I was just in an organization that had 70 security tools in their environment. And I'm talking about from log servers all the way to their EDR tools, right? And everything in the middle. And when we started to look at it, some of these devices, some of these software that they had in place, they were only utilizing somewhere up to like 15% of the full capabilities of the platform that they had purchased for umpteen, $1 million or whatever they paid for it, right? A friend of mine, so I'm a huge fan of CrowdStrike, for example, and a friend of mine as a CISO rolled out CrowdStrike, and I was like, good job, that's a killer product to use. And I said, is it on all your end devices? And he's like, all of them that are in our CMDB. And I said, how often do you update that? Like, how do you keep that thing healthy? He's like, okay, we need to talk, right? Let me help you make sure that you're actually rolling this expensive software out to all of your devices and getting the full value out of what you purchase. So let's start looking at that. And then accountability and enforcement, right? Be accountable, own things. For me, this is about giving accountability to my team, giving ownership to my team, right? The more ownership you give over, which is also sometimes hard to do, you want to control things. I'm a little bit of a control freak, but you have to let go. And if you let go and give other people accountability, you'll be surprised. They'll do great things for you, okay? So I just want to share kind of as a last thought. I don't even know how much time I have. I'm just enjoying the heck out of myself. I'm okay? All right. As long as you guys aren't getting up and walking out, I'm just going to keep going, right? But I just wanted to share this with you all. Cybersecurity is a shared responsibility, okay? We were just talking about that, right? So from all the way, well, I prefer the Nordics. In the Nordics, right, in Denmark and Sweden, you can walk into the CISO's office and you'll have everybody sitting around these tables and you won't know who the CISO is, right? You go to the CISO's office in the United States and it's like, I'm the CISO and all these people work for me, right? So I like more the like kind of flat level because I like to see this. I like to see security shared from the executive team all the way down to the new hires, right? In every single part of our organization, if it's finance, HR, IT, everybody should start thinking about cybersecurity. And that's why I'm so happy to see so many hands up when I asked about training internally, right? So here's my call to action. I want to see and I want to hear next time, because I was here last year. Was anybody in my talk last year in Edinburgh? Oh, good. Fresh fish. All right, this is great. No, I want to maybe, when I see any of you again, right? Or even if you come to the Tanium booth, please feel free to come by and have a chat. I want to see this happening more in organizations. More open conversations about cybersecurity. For years, people were ashamed. There was a level of shame that went along with clicking on a link, right? Getting caught out in a phishing email test from your security team, from your IT team. Zach Warren, Chief Security Advisor of Tanium, clicked on a phishing link. Luckily, it was a test by our internal IT team, okay? Now, I totally sold it internally that I was just testing them, right? To see what their process was behind it, right? Of course I did. I had to save some face, but I made that mistake as well. And I think about security all the time. So have open conversations with no shame, okay? Educate everybody you talk to about cybersecurity. Make sure that people are excited about this thing. Let's start to streamline efforts, okay? So if an organization, as a CISO, as a CIO, as anybody on their teams, right? If you see opportunities where you can, and sorry for the term because I'm from West Texas, we use these types of terms, when you can kill two birds with one stone, right? I know some people love birds. I love birds too, all right? But if you can kill two of them with one stone, hopefully they're yummy, then why not put those processes together? Why not start to streamline things? Like I was talking about with NIST2 and DORA. As I read through both of those, I said, oh, that rings a bell. Oh, that rings a bell. And so I coached a couple of organizations that needed help with those, that there's certain programs that we could build like asset discovery and inventory that checks the box, right? And make sure that you're compliant for both NIST2 and DORA, but it's only one program that we've established. So see how we can streamline our efforts there. Because there's a lot of times too many things going on at once. And then back to teams. Empower your organizations to have ownership. And I'll give you one of my very personal pet peeves, one thing that really drives me absolutely bonkers. It's when there's an incident. So I've been called into many, many incidents and I've been in plenty war room situations, right? Where you're standing in a war room and sometimes I've had to take the head, which is not the funnest place to be because then you have to kind of become a general and start yelling at people and telling people to go get you what you need. But the worst thing in the world is when I need specific data and then I have a manager stand in front of me like, that's my team. I'll get you that data. And I'm like, no, stand down. I need that person behind you, the actual talented one, to go get me that data, right? I need somebody that's really good at forensics and you're the manager. Who's the best at forensics on your team? Go get that guy or that gal. That's who I want in my incident response, right? So let's take our egos out of things, right? Let's make sure that we are enabling our teams to do the right thing, that we're enabling the talent in our teams. I was just talking to a young lady here who's getting into the profession of cybersecurity. We should all be looking for gems like this, people that are interested in cybersecurity and saying, how can I enable you in my organization? How can I help start your career? Because if we can start people young, if we can teach them about cybersecurity, get them excited about it, and they all don't have to have a powerful technical background and they didn't have to work in signals in the Air Force and in the NSA, right? That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about people that just have some passion around cybersecurity that are gonna help us with awareness, that are gonna help us make cyber more front of mind for organizations. So my call to action, my challenge to all of you is, and maybe I'm a little too passionate, My wife tells me sometimes I'm a little too passionate. I'll give you another funny anecdote. My wife, we had some kids over from my son's soccer team, football team, right? And one of the fathers came to pick up one of the boys, right? My son's 10 now, came to pick up one of the boys. I hadn't met this father yet. And so I answered the door and I stood in the door of my house and talked to the man on my doorstep, right? And I was chatting with him as I'm standing in the door, and I hear my wife call from the kitchen, which is just kind of around the corner. Hey, Zach, stop with your zero trust crap and let the man in the house. I was like, oh, okay. So even my wife is thinking about cybersecurity all the time, right? So I let the gentleman in the house. Luckily, he was a nice guy and I didn't have to throw him out or anything, right? So yeah, keep that in mind. Empower your teams. Find ways to make your team stronger, have more conversations around cybersecurity, all right? And if you have any questions, want to have a chat, I'll be at the Tanium booth. More than happy to talk about what Tanium does. The visibility and speed that we can bring to your organizations is something that has improved my life as a CISO and as a security analyst. The very first time I saw Tanium, it changed my life and how I did security. And that's why I work for Tanium now, is because I was so impressed with the technology. So if you want to have a conversation about that, more than happy to do that. All right. So thank you for your time, everybody, and I really appreciate the opportunity. Thanks.
Thanks, sir. Pop up your hands if you have any questions.
Do we have? Oh.
Yeah.
All right. I like questions. Hold on. I have to put my headset on for this because you speak softly too. Okay.
Okay, thank you so much, Zach. That was really nice. So I'm wondering, I'm curious, if compliance is not equal to security, why do we have these regulations?
Yeah.
And why is it not like made such that compliance would at least give a decent security posture and you have to do the extras?
So it's kind of, oh, that sounds weird. Okay. So it's a great question. The thing is what the regulations are, is you can think of them almost as a framework for you to start moving forward with building a security posture, right? Because if nobody ever said, hey, this is where you start, and these are the things you should be focused on, then everybody would be coming at this single problem in multiple different ways, right? It's one of the beautiful things about different cultures, right? As I've lived in different countries around the world, I've always seen we as humans always have the same problems, right? And where do we get water, right? Where do we get food? But then we all come about and solve for these problems differently based on our environments, based on our own knowledge, based on what's been handed down to us from generations. So these regulations are meant to kind of level set that playing field and say, hey, everybody, we need to look at these basics. Because if you really start to look at NIS2 and DORA as examples, or GDPR, there's a lot of basics in there, right? Access. Who has access to what? Should they have access to it, right? So zero trust type of stuff, right? What are your devices? Are they protected? Are they on the latest version of whatever OS they run, right? So a lot of very basic things are built into these regulations, and that's why we have them, is really to make sure everybody kind of starts from the ground level.
Any further
Any other questions? No?
Okay, another round of
All right,
applause for
cool.
Zach, please.
Thank you very much.